All right, thanks everybody for coming. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is the welcome to the, we're going to record the meeting on Zoom, and there's a few Zoom participants on there. But for those of you on Zoom, if you have any questions, be sure to raise your hand, but we'll get to that at the very end. It's very hard to mediate between Zoom and the room all at the same time sometimes. For those of you that may not know me, my name is George Rodericks. I'm the city manager for the town of Atherton. Been here since 2012. We do have a number of other staff members here. We got Robert Barone, who's the assistant city manager, finance director. Don Ford over here, who's our planning manager. Christabel Soria Mendoza, who's our management analyst in the city manager's office. And then we also have a council member here, Councilmember Eric Lane over here. And we have a committee member, Terry Lugers, who I think stepped outside. But this is the first of a number of workshops. There'll be probably 3 of them here at City Hall. And then in the month of March, in communities and neighborhoods who have associations, I'll be going out and doing some meetings in neighborhoods for those that ask. Thanks, Mona. And then tonight's meeting is just the kickoff. So it's very, very high level. Not a lot of details, but very, very high level. And it's slated for an hour and a half, but hopefully it doesn't last an hour and a half. So it's a small group here. So some of you may know each other, but I don't know everybody in the room. So maybe you could start around and introduce yourself.
I'm John Anderson. I live on Encinal Avenue in Atherton.
Welcome.
I'm Teresa Carlamagno. I live on Walsh Road in Atherton.
I'm Hans Brendan in Stockport Settlements.
Ted Haynes, Patricia Drive.
Carol Flaherty, Camino por los Árboles.
Ken Frederick Lindenwood, Flood Circle. Or Burkhardt, Farland.
Jennifer Anderson on Homer Lane and Homer long-term planner.
Michael McPherson, Washington.
Eric Lane, Encina Avenue, and John, I get all your mail, because the Encinal mail comes to me.
Patty Lugers on Lowry Drive.
Jerry Lugers.
That's the commission I was, meeting member I was talking about. So that. All right, so I've got a very brief PowerPoint presentation. And then we can do some Q&A. Oh, I'm sorry, also on the phone there in the top right of the video screen is Mona Ibrahimi, who is the city attorney. Welcome,
Hey.
Mona.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
So get started here. Screen. So a general law city governed by state statutes applies uniformly to all such cities. Charter city operates under a voter approved charter. Those are the two basic focus. It functions as a local constitution, whereas a general law city doesn't have. So the distinction is about the source of its governing authority. So for a general law city, we get our authority from basically state statutes. For a charter city, you've got that fundamental constitution that the jurisdiction will adopt. But with anything, the devil's in the details. And in this case, it's really state legislation that sort of blurs, or is currently trying to blur the distinction between a general law city and a charter city when they deem issues to be of statewide concern. And when that happens, they can apply that issue to a charter city as well as a general law city. And that's where a lot of jurisdictions recently have thought about becoming charter cities in an attempt to get around state housing laws or other things that they feel that, you know, we didn't adopt as a local jurisdiction. Why should they apply to us? We adopted a charter. That's how it's supposed to be governed. But the state gets around that by adopting those issues as matters of statewide concern, and then that makes them apply to charter cities as well as general cities. The most popular of those recently has been legislation like SB 9 for lot subdivisions, SB 79 for around transit-oriented districts, a lot of new ADU laws and a lot of the new housing laws, and the regional housing needs assessment required to comply with that as well. So what is a general law city? Basic stuff. Here you've got a lot of handouts on the table that go through some of those. So some local decisions we can make as a general law city within state defined limits, local services and operations. Basically, that means we can decide how many police officers, how many staff, how our parks work, what fees we want to have in our park, and those sorts of things. Zoning and land use administration, this is where it gets a little tricky. The town can adopt local design standards. We could have design review here in Atherton if we wanted to. Setback rules and other review processes, but here is where the state's made a lot of issues and matters of statewide concern related to housing and land use. And so if the state says it is, then we have to comply with state law, even though our local law is different. Local fees, we can set permit fees and service fees for the park, building permit fees, however we choose to do that, so long as we follow the state methodologies for adopting those fees. Day-to-day management, city manager oversees staff, prepares the budget, manages operations, that's all within our governance structure. Local ordinances, we can regulate noise, we can regulate parking, tree protection, heritage streets, construction hours, and do all those things under the state's general law. Where are we limited? Well, in some cases, we're limited by our governance structure. We have to follow the state prescribed options for governance structure. Elections, we're sort of stuck with the state's set election schedule. And it determines many requirements that are dictated by law, how many days in advance we have to call election, all that sort of stuff. It's all part of the state election code. Contracting rules, we got procurement thresholds, and we've got prevailing wage requirements if we receive federal money, if it's above a certain threshold, there's certain guidelines that we have to follow per state law. And then the biggest one that is a matter of concern locally here recently has been housing mandates. All of the housing mandates, all of the arena requirements, the new ADU laws, the SB 9 laws, we've got to abide by all of those as a general law city. So, charter city. You flip your little handout over. It talks about what a charter city is, and that gives us a little more freedom. For example, on governance procedures, we could define some local rules for the city council or procedures for our organization beyond what the state law mandates. With local elections, we could set election procedures locally, how we do that, how we comply with the Constitution. As long as we're compliant with voting rights acts, things like that, we can set our own guidelines. Public contracting, we could adopt very specific local procurement processes rather than relying on the state bidding statutes, where we are permitted to do so. We would establish local rules for hiring and discipline and compensation packages. We could be a civil service agency if we wanted to be as a charter city, subject of course to labor laws and constitutional law. We have a lot more administrative flexibility. We could streamline certain internal processes to make them better match our size and service expectations. But there's not a lot of gain there, different than what we're already doing as a small agency. What a charter city still can't do is violate state housing laws, RENA, SB 9, ADU laws, and all those things that they make matters of statewide concern. If the state's done that, then we still have to comply with it, even as a charter city. There's certain environmental and civil rights laws we still have to comply with. Taxes and fees, while we can enact certain types of taxes that general law cities cannot, we still have to follow the process by which we adopt those taxes. You have to vote for those taxes. Those are all still requirements. So the bottom line is that being a charter city gives us a little more freedom, but there's still a lot of caveats to that freedom. And as a small jurisdiction, the question is there enough bang for the buck becoming a charter city? What do we gain by becoming a charter city? And that's for all you folks to kind of decide whether you feel it's worth it or not. As a member of staff, I can't persuade you one way or the other. My presentation tonight is just flat out objective. There's pros and cons to both. The city council put together a very bare bones draft charter. That's also on the table that you've got there, a draft sample charter. It's just a real simple 2-page charter. And it basically covers 4 or 5 things. It affirms home rule authority over municipal affairs, and municipal affairs is one of those legal terms of art. What the state says is a municipal affair is what is a municipal affair. it's interpreted a lot of different ways. The charter maintains council-manager form of government, provides for the council election of mayor and vice mayor, the way they do it now, it rotates every year. Continues all existing ordinances and policies, and it includes very broad interpretation and severability provisions. It's very bare bones, very basic. You look at some other bigger cities and their charters may be 40, 50, 60 pages long because they're trying to throw everything into that they can. And that makes it a lot harder sometimes to manage. Because every time you need to amend a charter, unlike your municipal code, you gotta go to a vote. With your municipal code, it goes to a public hearing, public comment period, goes through that process and you adopt a change to the code. To the charter, it's gotta go through a whole election process to the public to change anything within the charter. So it makes it a little more complicated. So the council thought, we'll just make it very simple. What we have works. Let's protect our rights where we can and provide us as much flexibility as we can. So what we're doing here is just a workshop, an opportunity to ask some Q&A. The city attorney's on the line as well to answer some of those Q&A, and staff's here as well. We got this workshop. We've got another one coming up in February 26th. Same sort of thing. Answer questions. And then in the month of March, like I said, I'll be going out to some neighborhood neighborhood community groups, do some neighborhood meetings if they want to have me there, as long as they give me a glass of wine. And then on April 30th, we'll have a wrap-up workshop, which will be formulating all the Q&A that we've got, putting that all together, answering any final questions. And then in May and June, we bring it back to the city council. Based on all that feedback, the council then decides whether or not they want to put it on the ballot in November for you all to vote on. So I think, well, one of the last things there, what the charter doesn't do, that's in your notes as well. It doesn't impose any new taxes or any new fees, doesn't change any zoning or density or land use rules, doesn't eliminate compliance with state laws that we have to comply with for issues of statewide concern, and it doesn't change our current form of government. It just protects what's currently in place. So that's my presentation.
What are the disadvantages of becoming a charter city?
The disadvantages, so some of the cons are, anything, like, CEQA, and help me out here, Mona, when you can jump in at any point. Like the California Environmental Quality Act, you've got to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act whenever you're approving a project. If you're ever going to change your general plan, when anything's reviewed by staff, it's reviewed for compliance with the town's general plan. This just adds another threshold of if we are approving a project, reviewing a project, or doing anything, we've got to make sure it complies not only with the general plan, but it also has to comply with whatever provisions the town's adopted within its charter.
I would just add, and George, sorry.
Go ahead.
You touched on this, but just to elaborate a little bit, any changes to the charter in the future will have to wait until there's an election. It has to go before the voters in a general election. So it can't happen when you need it. It's based on when that election happens, subject to the passage by the voters, as distinguished by what traditionally happens, which is a majority of the council approving something. So the first thing is timing. We'd have to wait a lot longer if we wanted to make any changes to the charter. 2, there's an expense associated anytime you put something on the election, on the ballot, and waiting for the election. 3rd, it's just a little bit more difficult to do. One more disadvantage is that people think it's the granting of additional authority. It's actually a limitation on authority. The authority granted to all cities, whether general law or charter, comes from the Constitution. What a charter city does is it establishes home rule on municipal affairs, but then whatever the town adopts, for example, within that charter, becomes a limitation because all decisions must comply with that. Sometimes the charter is used as a sword by someone who wants to challenge the town's decision. And the way that they do that is they say that you have not complied or this decision is inconsistent with the terms of your charter. I've just been retained to help a city on this exact issue where a project was approved and the challenger is arguing that the city did not comply expressly with the terms of their own charter. So, as I mentioned, it's not just necessarily for good, it could also be used to challenge decisions as well, which could be costly.
Which is one of the reasons when the council looked at crafting a draft charter, it made it very simple and not a lot of detail.
What are the costs associated with becoming a charter student?
The election, to adopt the charter,
Just the
and
election,
then.
just basically
as-
election costs.
Yeah, and then as Mona mentioned, the regular compliance requirements, making sure things are consistent or compliant with the charter. That's not extremely costly. But changes to the charter, you have to do that whole election process again, and every time we do that here in San Mateo County, it's 45 days.
George, let me add to the disadvantages, because there are some more. There's a big one, and it's taxes. So, for those of you who don't know me, I was pretty involved in our multifamily housing. And so a year and a half ago, 2 other residents and I came to a council meeting and we asked the council to please consider whether Atherton should be a charter city. And Atherton had already considered it several years earlier and decided no. And the reason we asked for it is that these 2 other residents and I had gone to a meeting of our neighborhood voices, and we met the mayor of Palo Alto and the mayor of Los Altos at that time. And they told us that Atherton was crazy for not being a charter city. And so we kind of got into this, and one of the other people that came with me was a lawyer here in town. Another one was involved with me on the multifamily housing. So we started to look at it ourselves, and we got really into it. And we read a whole bunch of city charters. And we read reports of why this town decided to do it or that town didn't. And then the city council graciously agreed to go ahead and look at this. And Stacy Holland and Rick DeGolia became the city council members that were on a committee of 2 and Mona was involved, and George, to review it and come up with a recommendation. I went to a couple of the meetings, and I will say I thought they did an excellent job. Really an excellent job. I did not think we had to have a 120-page charter, as I was reading where every single thing was defined in the charter, and as George said, it would be very difficult. So we realized early on that it was not going to help us with multifamily housing at all, because the state emergency, overrides everything. But what did appeal to us as residents, longtime residents, I've been here since 1985, was that we would have more control over our town. But for me, it was one positive thing in particular and one negative thing in particular. By the way, Mona did a terrific job in those meetings with Rick and Stacy and George of really explaining things and providing very thoughtful guidance. They were really good meetings, some of the best I've attended in the town. So some of us felt that the town was paying too much for some of the contracts that were being awarded. And what really ticked us off at that time was the playground. Over $1 million for the playground to be redone. We thought that was absurd. Well, it wasn't really $1 million for the playground. It was to redo a lot of other work in Holbrook Palmer that did need to be done, and it's costly. But it became apparent to us, this is on the positive side, that if you are not a charter city, then you have to agree that your contractors will use state rates, which are high. And we noticed that there weren't many bids for our city projects. And we felt the bids were quite high. And if you didn't have to agree to that, I happened to own a building at that time that was leased to the federal government, and I had to have always contractors that would agree to state wages. It was a nightmare for me, a nightmare to find them and get them to agree to do the work. And so we said, well, gee, if we're a charter city, we don't have to do that anymore. We can hire whoever we want, and we don't have to pay prevailing state wages. And maybe we can get more bids, and maybe we can do things at a more reasonable cost. That sounded pretty good. And we weren't, the other thing is you have more control, the city council can have more control over the city manager. We fortunately don't have a problem with our city manager, so we have no need for the council to take over and really manage the town more than the city manager does, but that's another thing. We didn't think that was that important, nor frankly did we think it was that important, because when you have a pretty limited charter, that you have to go get it voted on for changes, because this is so broad that, I don't think that's a real concern here. But there was one concern, and it's a big one. And it really made me question whether I even would have recommended becoming a charter city and its taxes. So under California law, taxes have to be passed by 2/3 of the population. Not if you're a charter city. Simple majority. And so it came up, Atherton doesn't have a transfer tax. When you sell your property, you don't have to pay a transfer tax in Atherton. Other cities do. And so the context of the conversation was, if Atherton was ever in financial trouble, which 25 years ago we were. We were in some serious financial trouble over the pension funds at that time. Then the residents, as long as there was a majority vote, could pass new taxes, and one might be a transfer tax, there might be taxes if we had other needs. Fortunately, today, we're not in that financial position. We're in a very good position. But you need to be aware that that's a big one. And it's a really big one. That would be a negative to it.
Can we set the percentage required to raise taxes in our charter?
So I'm gonna let Mona chime in on two issues. One is prevailing wage, because as you know, the town receives, we received several $1 million in federal grants. We received some for Alameda de los Pozos project. The playground is a county grant, which comes through, funneled through from state funds.
Just the number of.
We use state funds in a number of other areas, gas tax, Measure A, Measure M. And then we also we have some drainage projects that are funded by federal grants. Anytime we use that money, which is a good augment to our budget because we just don't have the available cash to do those projects without those grants, we are still required to comply with all prevailing wage laws. So even if it's just a local project and we're a charter city and we're just using local money for it, small project, yeah, maybe we don't have to do that. But anytime we accept any of those other funds, we are still required to do that. And a lot of the town's capital improvement projects do use other people's money to get that accomplished. And Mona, do you want to chime in on the voting requirement?
Sure. Just really quickly on the taxes, the Supreme Court just issued a decision about a month ago, confirming that a charter city that exempts itself from prevailing wages can do so, and that is a municipal affair that can be implemented. And something that I've been monitoring is that the courts, and interestingly in this one, the California Supreme Court has been a lot more lenient on charter cities developing and implementing exceptions for themselves with respect to public contracting and prevailing wages. By stark contrast, they have been holding the opposite with any kind of housing legislation and determining that especially all the new housing laws that have come out, some which George has mentioned, Senate Bill 9, Senate Bill 35, so on and so forth. It doesn't matter if a charter city doesn't want to comply. They are required by law to comply because housing is in short supply in California and it's a matter of statewide importance. One other thing that's really important here is that an issue that we're talking about today or a month from now or a couple months from now, because right now I just said prevailing wages, a charter city has authority to exempt itself from. In the future, the legislature can enact new laws that state essentially that this is a matter of statewide importance, make findings to that extent, and then even a charter city must comply with them. So to a certain extent, a large extent, we really are at the beck and call of what the legislature establishes to be important. Right now, and for the past several years, housing has been an issue. Maybe in 30 years, housing will no longer be in short supply and charter cities don't have to comply with housing laws. But that is to say, what applies today may not apply tomorrow, and we can have further restrictions on powers. And then with respect to the ability to impose a transfer tax. Yes, a charter allows the town to impose a transfer tax. And yes, you can limit the amount that that tax is going to be.
Mona, it was, that one I think was fairly clear. I think it was the voting threshold required for taxes. Is this just a
It
general?
is a simple majority. Yes, you can go, a charter city can make itself available as long as the voters agree, rather than a 2/3 requirement, changing it to a simple majority.
But is that by measure or does that have to be in the charter?
It would have to be in the charter.
So the current charter doesn't have anything like that in it. It's just whatever the state law is. But we retain that authority to do, and if we wanted to amend the charter to change the thresholds, as Jerry's mentioned, that would be something you could add to the charter, or,
Oh, no, we don't want it.
right?
Right.
It's not in there
But I
now.
didn't think it had to be in the charter. I thought that charter cities had a right, just by virtue of being a charter city, to have a simple majority to pass tax. Is
There,
that, it's not correct?
you have to, so in the powers that you establish for yourself, you have to affirmatively state that you are taking advantage of the ability to impose taxes. And we have not done that in the draft charter. Once you do that, any tax measure that is before voters needs a simple majority as opposed to 2/3. Is that a little bit more clear? So in other words, we have to give ourselves the right to do that in the charter. Once the charter is approved with that language, future tax measures then need a simple majority.
I love this charter just the way it is.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Apparently Palo Alto and Los Altos have become charter cities. What percentage of cities in the state are charter cities, and what percentage of the population of the state do they represent, just generally?
There's only about 100, there's 480 some odd cities in the state, and only about 120 or so of them are charter cities.
Oh, 25%, that's not unmeaningful.
But a
Most-
large number in
There's-
this area.
I was gonna ask how
And
many
so
in the
Palo
Bay
Alto and
Area.
Los Altos are two of them.
Surprisingly, Berkeley, Oakland, on the other side, so a very large number. I think Redwood City is a charter city, if I recall correctly, no?
No,
But it's a large number in the Bay Area.
yeah, and usually it is the larger jurisdictions. So the smaller jurisdictions like Los Altos Hills and others that are thinking about it are usually not.
But Los Altos is apparently.
Los Altos versus Los Altos.
Were they the ones that said we were crazy enough to do it?
Yeah,
So they are, so they must be doing it, right?
they are, and Palo Alto,
And Palo.
Have they
Yeah.
been charter cities for a while?
they have been.
For a while.
And what do
Yeah.
they espouse as the benefits? Why do they think we're crazy for not being that? What?
They were referring to it more as home rule, which is the ability to govern yourself more and not be restricted by all the state laws. So I think that was their interest.
Except that the state laws all still largely apply.
I don't, I do think that the financial element, not having to do prevailing wages would be a big benefit to us.
Yes.
I really do.
Yeah.
And open up more
With the
contracting.
tax.
But I was concerned about a transfer tax because, our property values are high now, and even if you put, 1% tax on, you're talking a significant amount when the properties sell.
Of
Now,
course.
now on the prevailing wage issue, Mona, correct me if I'm wrong, we can exempt ourselves from prevailing wage, but if we accept other money, they can
That's
add.
Absolutely right. So we would, and there's a danger to that because if, for example, staff, operates business as usual and says we're a charter city, we don't have to comply with prevailing wage laws. But there is even a small component of a project that gets any kind of state or federal funding, we are required to comply with all of those state and federal regulations, which includes prevailing wage, and it converts the entirety of that project into a prevailing wage project. Really quickly, Los Altos is not a charter city. It was discussing becoming a charter city last year. Redwood City is a charter city. Palo Alto is a charter city. Mountain View is another example. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and
I'm sorry,
all of
Los
our-
Altos is not, is that what we see?
That's
Some-
correct.
Not, they're not.
Even though they said we're
But
crazy for not doing
their
it?
former mayor was saying that we should become one.
Yeah, so all of your,
What they do.
all of your street and road projects, all your drainage projects, all of your, what are the projects out there, Robert?
Drainage, sidewalks.
Sidewalk, bike lanes.
Bike lanes, parks,
Parks, there's park money,
projects that are.
That's
that we have
all.
Grant money.
it would be prevailing wage if, yeah.
So this is kind of a related question. Mona, I'm not sure if you can tell me, but to what extent do charter cities, does it, if you are a charter city, does that negatively impact funding, either federal or state funding or any other kind of funding
no, not that I'm aware of.
Title II?
Although you still have to comply with the conditions of accepting that.
So if you are funded, then you may have to comply with the state prevailing
You
Yes.
do.
That's
You
a
have to do that.
laws of the state.
And-
The state
Sorry, I'm just an engineer, so I don't understand a lot of this high financial stuff. So maybe you and Carol can help me with this. If we have to pay higher rates because we're a regular city, and it's harder to get people to accept higher rates, I don't understand how that works. If we're paying more, shouldn't more people wanna get the business?
No,
I'm confused, we're paying less, shouldn't we have less people getting back?
We really, it's a competitive bid process for
I
all of
understand,
our,
yeah,
all of our projects. Then we take the lowest responsive bidder, lowest responsible bidder. We haven't really had a big challenge with that. I mean, Carol's comments aside, I haven't seen a problem in the years. We do have some projects that it's hard to get bidders for. For example, the train station remodel, it was hard to get bidders for that because it was a very small project and nobody wanted to bid on it. The cafe over there was another challenging project because it was a very small improvement and not a lot of bidders out there. Carol actually stepped in and made that one happen. Street and road projects, no problem. Drainage projects, no problem. Playground project, there wasn't a problem there. The bathrooms in the carriage house, again, small project renovation, nobody wants to bid on that. So it's hard to get bidders to.
But my question wasn't very clear. My question is, I'm gonna put the bid out for the playground, the new kids playground. If I'm a charter city, I can pay less. So therefore I think it's gonna be $300,000 or $1 million. But as a non-charter city, I have to pay more, so it's gonna be $1.3 million.
It's kind of a union thing.
But so if I have to.
I understand your question and I can
The
respond.
1.3 than the 1.0?
Mona, what you
No.
got?
Yeah, I can respond to that. I think for communities that are smaller, the payment of prevailing wages actually benefits them. I, in fact, represent another small city that is a little bit more remote. And if they did not require the payment of prevailing wages, they probably wouldn't get any competitive bidders to respond to their requests for bids because contractors wouldn't want to go out there to do the work. They do it because of the payment of prevailing wages, which results in a little bit more expensive of a project for the municipality. There also is an argument that even if a charter city could exempt itself from prevailing wages, not all of them do. And the reason for that is because the Public Contract Code requires cities to award construction contracts to the lowest responsive bidder. What that means is they have to comply with all of the requirements in essentially our application and say that they're going to build it according to our specifications, and they have to be the lowest bidder. We do not get to have any kind of control over the quality or workmanship that contractor provides, only really looking at cost. So advocates for prevailing wages say that the payment of prevailing wages attracts higher quality workers who are retained longer by their companies and who have a better understanding of state and federal requirements and local requirements. and not just provide a better work product for the municipality, but ensure that we don't fall out of compliance and potentially lose our grant funding.
Well, as a builder, I can tell you that's hogwash, what they say. So my experience with this, again, we owned a building that was leased to the federal government. It's not just, I don't know if this is true in California, Mona and George, so I could be talking, hogwash myself here on this. But not only did the contractors that I wanted to use have to agree to prevailing wages, federal at that time, they had to sign a statement, they agreed to all federal regulations and all federal codes. Now, of course, they signed it and nobody did it. So to your point, Ken, well, isn't the company better? No, they're not. Because my HVAC company quit me because they said, no, we are not going to pay federal wages because the owner of the company would have had to pay all of the employees more, but he wasn't necessarily getting more. And so I had to find a new company. And then when I went out to bid, this was in South Carolina, nobody wanted to bid. They didn't want to be restricted with all these federal regulations. When I gave them the page, it said you have to sign up for this, they said drop dead.
Yeah, so it's not really the dollars, it's the overhead and encumbrances you sign up when you get the dollars.
So we had to do, for this project, Town Center project, we had to do prevailing wage, we had to do certified payroll, and it's a lot of reporting, it's a lot of compliance efforts. But the contractor didn't have a problem, and they complied all the way along, and all the town had to do was make sure that that was happening.
But George, you're kind of limited. You're not gonna get a whole lot of people bidding on a $57 million project. Well, you do like a little playground. And that's, I think it's the small projects where it becomes more meaningful, not the real large ones.
Right.
Yeah, you're taking all the standard requirement, all that, it's not so much the dollars, it's
a little onerous.
It's all the overhead
Yeah.
crap you gotta go do to meet them there.
All of that stuff. So I just thought that it really kind of opened it up, and if we had more control over our own business here in town, we're a well-run town.
But again, and I'm not arguing one way or the other, I'm just trying to equalize here that
Right.
the majority of our CIP projects in town are funded with other people's money.
Yeah, so asking.
Yeah,
So if
yeah,
we
yeah.
don't,
I get
if
it.
we're not able to
Grants
do
and
that,
things like that. That's a
money's
valid
gotta come
point.
from somewhere.
So asking Robert
Yeah.
that question, I mean, we got a budget like $24 million, right? And so of all the money we spend on projects like that, how much could, if we didn't meet the requirements of standing wage, how much would that be?
If I had to hazard a guess, I'd say, what, 5 to 7 million a year? And additional revenue would need to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have another question, maybe Mona, it's more of a long game question. And that is, I see, that there's a tension between these terms, home rule authority, which our home rule authority is supposed to be broadly interpreted in our favor, versus statewide concerns, and SB 9 has been mentioned as a statewide concern. Is that being challenged? Is that being litigated?
Very good question. Yes. So several cities in the Southern California area challenged this in the trial court and explained that Senate Bill 9 was not a matter of statewide concern and they shouldn't have to comply with it. That trial court judge agreed and ruled in favor of the cities. Rob Bonta and the state of California appealed it to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal reversed and said that it's not true and that they are now having to comply. When this case first came out, and before this issue even went to the Court of Appeal, my admonishments to our council was two things, because there was some interest. Well, if we become a charter city, we don't have to comply with Senate Bill 9. Now, Senate Bill 9 actually helps the town in meeting some of its housing element objectives. And globally, it's not a problem for us, but it was one microcosm of the larger scale land use housing rules that are kind of being shoved down every municipality's throat. And my feedback then was that I believe that the Court of Appeal is going to reverse. They ended up reversing. And I said, but even if they don't, this is going to be a simple legislative fix where the assembly member, goes back and makes a one sentence finding articulating why it's a matter of statewide concern and essentially cures and corrects the fatal flaw of the legislation. And now they're more keen on it, and now they're including language so that there aren't any challenges. So
And so no reason to petition the Supreme Court Cal Supreme Court for review then.
no, interestingly enough, Huntington Beach, I think, is the most resistant city in California. Has been challenging every single and refusing to even comply with the housing element. And they've been losing every single step of the way, including at the California State Supreme Court level. They have now said that they are going to petition the United States Supreme Court on these issues. And my best guess is that they are not going to hear it. And this is going to end with a massive payout of Huntington Beach of penalties and fines and ultimate compliance with everything that they had to do from day one.
Yeah, they'll be put down.
Interesting. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you all might be interested in knowing that 9 families here in town, including ourselves, hired the same lawyer that is working those cases. And we were interested in privately suing. She told us don't. Just go ahead. Don't spend the money on me right now because she's expensive, and let's follow what these 5 cities are doing. And if we're gonna lose all the way through, which she thought they would, all the way through California, she said it's hopeless in California, then, let them pay the money and you can ride the coattails. And we're glad we did. So,
But still, you can see why Huntington challenges, and I think other jurisdictions should too, maybe, because to me, SB 9 abrogates our general plan, the Atherton general plan, and everything about it, the purpose of, having a lot of trees and not having sidewalks, whatever, and the size of the lots, it just seems to totally override our general plan.
Yes, I agree.
So, there you go.
And there will be more.
I think until you get out of California courts, it's hopeless.
Yeah.
But, thankfully, somebody is appealing it all the way, and we'll see where it goes.
I think the gentleman behind you would like to speak.
Yeah, it sounds to me from something that you said, that when we write this charter, no matter how carefully we write it, we're gonna wind up in court from our own residents or from the state or from somebody who's gonna say you're not conforming to your charter, or the charter was wrong in the first place. And that's, for one thing, it's gonna cost us a lot of money, and it may negate the charter. And perhaps the solution is, or one solution is to make our charter as similar as possible to other cities' charters, so that it becomes a bigger issue, and we have allies in this, rather than trying to go our own way. Does that make any sense?
Well,
Yeah,
go ahead, Mona.
So typically, charters are not challenged just for the sake of challenging the charter. And I don't think it's inevitable that someone's going to challenge it. I just think it's a possibility. And that possibility increases when someone is dissatisfied with a decision that is made by the town, because at that point, they will look at every avenue to challenge that decision, whether it's on CEQA grounds, land use and planning, failure to comply with our general plan, failure to comply with our charter. And so it's just an additional risk that we have. But it's not necessarily that someone is going to be unhappy with, the charter as a whole. That I don't foresee that as being something that we should worry about. This is a document that we're legally allowed to have, and it's voted in by the voters. And the way that the council has drafted it does not go into any level of detail intentionally so that if it's adopted and voted by the residents in Atherton, there's a less likelihood when implemented that we are going to run afoul of it.
Well, and perhaps I misspoke. I don't mean a wholesale challenge to the charter. I just mean people bringing suits for various other things and referring to the charter and saying, you know, that the charter doesn't cover this. The charter is vague on this, or the charter is wrong from the beginning.
I see.
And therefore I can do what I want to do in the first place.
Right. So I think an example of that, and please don't take this as any kind of disrespect, Ms. Clarity. But so let's say we had a charter about a year and a half ago, and let's say we had a coalition of residents who was, very opposed to SB 9, but let's say we didn't have the Southern California decision. I could foresee these residents saying that our own charter grants us extensive authority over land use and planning, and you cannot and should not approve any kind of SB 9 development. You should exclude yourself from it and try to challenge, the town on those grounds. So when I say that the charter can be used as both a shield and a sword, that's what I mean.
Well, again, I think you did a great job. You and Rick and Stacy really putting this together, and I think that our 2 pages are protective of us.
Mona, could you reiterate again, or maybe Carol, the implications for simple majority of taxes, such as transfer taxes, versus the 2/3? So can you explain that again?
So the general law in California is that anytime a general law city wants to establish a general tax, it has to take it to the voters, and the general tax needs a 51% approval. A special tax, and a general tax is money that comes in, goes to the city's general fund, and can be used for any purpose.
That's a general law city, right?
I'm sorry.
That's a general law city can do.
As a general law city, correct. A special tax needs a 2/3 vote, and the difference between a special tax and a general law tax is that the special tax, you're articulating specific uses for which you're going to use it for. Let's say you say that we are raising funds exclusively for the police department. That means that any funds from that special tax shall only be used for police services. It cannot be commingled and used for parks, for construction projects, for the civic center, nothing else, okay? As a charter city, if in your charter you are giving yourself broad taxing authority, you are no longer constrained by that 2/3 voter requirement. The limitation now is a simple majority. And so in this instance, where it has come up before in Atherton, it's not a special tax to fund police services. It's a special tax to fund for transfer tax, property transfer taxes, by example. So if we were a general law city and we put that on ballot, it would be 2/3 vote. If we were a charter city, it would be 51%.
And are you saying by operation of law, or we have to first change the charter, say we can tax?
Right, we would include in our charter that the town is reserving all taxing authority to itself, and able to use it for allowing us wide latitude for taxing. And then once we do that, once we're giving ourselves that authority, any future tax that comes before our voters will be subject to a simple majority as opposed to 2/3.
Can we, I mean, maybe this is getting too far afield, but couldn't we say in the charter, we reserve the right to have taxing authority, but we, on certain issues, on the.
We can, yes, we can.
Tax, it has to be 2/3
We
Those-
can, and so that would be a restriction that we would be putting on ourselves in the charter, yes.
Okay.
Because again, the charter is really a blueprint. It's saying what you want to empower your council and your staff to be able to do or not do.
But Mona, absent that provision that she's talking about and being in the charter, as our current charter, what would be our taxing guidelines?
Yes.
So there's a case that the Vo case. It's hard for me to give a really clear response again because people will litigate this. So on the one hand, proponents of the Vo case will say once you become a charter law city, you're automatically entitled to the simple majority for taxes. There's another school of thought that says you have to affirmatively put it in your charter that taxing authority rests, and this is a power that we are expressly reserving to ourselves. We are not following state law. The way that our draft charter is set forth right now, I believe, is unless expressly stated. It doesn't. I don't think it says it like this, but largely it's unless it's expressly stated, we rely on state law, but we are carving out these special exceptions for ourselves. And for that reason, my recommendation would be that we do have language about taxing authority in the charter.
Mona, is a parcel tax a special tax or a general tax?
It would be a special tax.
Yeah, and so that's my other concern is that a parcel tax can now be passed by 51% or majority,
That's correct.
as
Yes,
opposed to 2/3.
that is correct.
So it's not just a transfer tax, it's parcel tax. I don't think we have a parcel
We,
tax right
we,
now.
no, we had the parcel
We tried.
tax,
And the
it
voters
was-
said,
the
forget
voters
it.
back in 2019 voted against it,
Right.
but that parcel tax was enacted for, I think, 12 or 16 years.
Right.
And the town was getting 1.8 million in parcel tax, and that was for capital projects, it was for streets and roads,
Uh-huh.
it was for public safety
Yeah.
services.
And
So-
20% was set aside for the museum.
Correct, so 1.86 million we were getting that, starting in 2019, we stopped getting, and we were using those funds for projects, for capital projects and PD.
It sounds like an incredibly complicated issue. It's got a lot of, unknowns. And it sounds as if we need very good advice from a certified tax specialist, attorney, on what might happen. I mean, I know.
Well, it's not as complex. The issue is, by operation of the charter, would the town want to limit its authority to impose taxes or not, right? Because, and I was just looking at an example, but the Porterville City Charter limits the purposes for which special taxes may be imposed to support the maintenance of the fire department. So it has in its charter said that we are going to limit the kinds of special taxes that can be imposed, and we want it to only be for the purpose of, the fire department or public improvements or public libraries, so on and so forth. So again, the general rule is, do we want to have take advantage of the lower voting threshold necessary for special taxes if we become a charter? That's the first question, right? If the answer is no, we don't move past that. If the answer is yes, we do. We want special taxes now to only need a simple majority as opposed to 2/3. Do we want that to be generally applicable to every kind of special tax? Or do we want to, as you mentioned, limit it to only certain kinds of taxes to the exclusion of others, right? To say, we agree that a special tax for police will have the benefit of, the simple majority, but perhaps not the parcel tax or, a transfer tax. That is for you all to decide.
The only, when Robert and I brought the revenue augmentation conversation to the council back in 2012 or 2013, we were talking about the parcel tax, and we were talking about other ways that the town could fund its own operations. We brought a number of issues forward. One of them was the real estate property transfer tax. That was the only real tax measure distinctive to a charter city that a general law city could not do. So virtually any other kind of tax, we can do now, and you all have to vote for it. But the real property transfer tax was one that a general law city could not do. It was expressly held to charter cities within state law. So if we became a charter city, then we got the opportunity to do a real property transfer tax. And that's where the conversation with the council, when they first started talking about becoming a charter city, went sideways. They said, no, you know, we don't want to enact a real property transfer tax, so there's really no reason for us to become a charter city. This was all before SB 9 and all those other conversations.
Well, it doesn't sound like Charter City will help us with SB 9 in any way, shape or
Yeah.
form anyway. So,
Right.
unless somebody on high says, no,
Right.
it's, you know, unconstitutional or whatever.
From my own experience in local government, been in local government now for 35 years. I was always not confused isn't the right word, but I always thought that a special tax should be easier to vote for, and a general tax should be harder to vote for. Because a general tax, I can use it for anything. I mean, I could put in dog stations at the park. I could do anything I want with that money that you guys voted for. But a special tax, that's specific. I can only use it for that. And if I can only use it for that, there's gonna be an audit trail, there's gonna be financial auditing reports required and all those sorts of things. So it should have an easier passage, because I'm already restricted to what I can use it for. And general tax should be a lot harder, but for some reason, the state knows the odds. It's just my personal opinion.
So George, again, I'm an engineer, I don't understand all this stuff. But as a sort of going forward, forgetting about today, because everything we've spent is sunk cost. To an election in November, what would the town spend if we go all the way through that, to that election, on staff time, consulting time, out-of-pocket stuff? What kind of number are we looking at for an election in November if we continue down this path, starting tomorrow?
Well, I'm a salaried employee, there's still
So
some.
we're paying your salary, you're
So
paying.
there's no, we're not getting paid to be here tonight, other than
You're doing something else, right? I mean,
city attorney might get paid.
it's
for
all
this
funded.
salary.
City attorney,
And then we have, the neighborhood meetings, in which no staff time involved, I just use printing work, on the copying machine, that's easy.
But your time is not free, I mean, you can use it for. you can
Well,
do it somewhere else.
my wife's a trivia tonight, I could be with her. So,
Cause
and have a nice glass
it's
of
not
wine.
free to the town, this
The
process is not free. to
the
the town.
only real cost is the election cost. And we've got an election in November already, so we would actually be adding this to that ballot. So you're probably looking at a differential cost of like $7K or something.
yeah,
Between the election we're already going to
Yeah,
have
yeah.
and the ad of the additional ad.
I think, George, is gonna be the marketing cost to get information out to the residents, because, you know, residents don't tend to come to our meetings.
And there's mailers and things like that, maybe those are like $2K a piece. And
Yeah,
we're
so
only
you're gonna
gonna
have
do
some
a couple of them.
mailers to really explain this to
We're
the
paying the
residents.
right? We're paying the outside consultants on a.
if we get outside consultants,
Outside.
that would be another cost.
Yeah, but the council said, no, we're not gonna go that route.
Do we have a sense from the council if they're leaning any way in favor again?
Oh, well, I can express what they expressed at public meetings. The general sentiment is mixed. Some of the members of the council just don't see a real need to adopt a charter right now because of all the housing legislation as matters of statewide concern. They are very concerned about the perception that if we go down this charter route, people are gonna be concerned about the real estate property transfer tax issue. That's something they've gone on the record in the past, saying that they're not interested in doing, but as a charter city, they have the option to do it. You know, voters have the option to approve it or not. There are some that are concerned that if we don't have a charter in place, by the time something else happens at the state where we do have the option and there is a distinction between being one or the other, and if we don't have a charter, we lose out. And so it's kind of a protective measure. So there's differences of perspective.
It does sound like a complicated issue to me. I mean, it's not that straightforward, like, it doesn't just boil down to, taxation and stuff, it's, it really depends on what specific area you're talking about.
Mhm.
How much interest in, have you been able to gauge interest from the town, from the people, the community generally in this, or do people even know about it?
Oh, as Carol and Ken mentioned, there's mailers and things like that. We sent out postcards that went out to the community.
I mean, who's pushing for,
So I think most people have no idea.
I agree.
None.
Yeah.
And the only reason that the three of us went is because we were involved very heavily in the multifamily. And then once we realized that it wasn't gonna do anything on the multifamily housing, then we started to look, what is there other benefit? But if it hadn't been for the mayor of Palo Alto and the mayor of Los Altos saying, you guys really should look at this, we wouldn't have known about it, to be honest with you. That's just regular residents,
I
living
still
here.
don't know
When was that
why
conversation?
they're so
A year and a half
adamant about
ago.
it.
A year and a
That
half
was
ago.
when we came to the
So
city
that's
council and asked them to
before
look at it.
the changes in charter protecting you on the housing, is that right?
I'm sorry, there was two.
No, charter's never protected on housing. So,
But
So
so
we're-
a year and a half ago, people thought, as you did, and we all did,
they
that
thought it
being
was
charter
gonna
will
help,
protect your
right.
housing. So those guys made that decision then, with that information. That information has now changed.
That makes sense.
Would they do it again? No one's asked that question.
Okay, that
Well,
makes sense.
Palo Alto, I think, has been.
So I have to be
for a long
honest,
time.
because
Oh, also,
Yeah, Palo Alto.
I'm the one that raised it. And I was all in favor of it, as were other individuals. We started talking to other residents. But over the tax issue, once that became glaringly apparent to me, I'm not sure that I would vote for it
Oh,
now.
I wouldn't,
To me, that's the
if
single
I understand it
issue
properly.
as a resident. Do I feel comfortable going from a 2/3 vote to a majority? And when we did that parcel tax and threw it out, it was over cowboy boots. And it was a group in Lindenwood that brought it up. And they said, we are fed up with the city spending money on things that aren't related to actual costs in the town. And I think if in a simple majority vote, we probably would still have a parcel tax, but because it was 2/3, we do not have one. So that, it makes a difference, that 2/3 and 51%. But the city council, again, studied this, I don't remember when, 5 or 6 years ago, George, or even longer.
2013 and
Yeah,
2014.
they did an
2016.
exhaustive
Yeah.
study, and
Yeah.
at that time, correct me if I'm wrong, the decision was, gee, it's a lot of admin work. Do we really have all the challenges of some other cities? Probably not. Do we want to go through all this admin stuff? And they decided no. But there is some merit to being able to control your city a little bit more. But there's the balance between how you feel about that versus vulnerabilities you may have in other areas.
There were some political challenges that the town was enduring in the 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years. That also contributed to some of that conversation. There was some concern that if a charter were adopted, it could be adopted, and you could end up with a strong mayor, or you could end up with a strong city council that was actually doing things in the organization, and there was some concern that that would be a problem in the community, and so that was part of the conversation back then, to add to your other bits about it. And when this staff report went to the city council, the one that Carol was talking about, those subcommittee meetings, that's available on the town's website. There was a list of, all of the areas where the charter could be of help, or all the areas that would be a problem. And there just didn't seem to be a heavy weight toward, these are all the benefits the town's gonna get. Yes, you have the taxing opportunity. Yes, there's a prevailing wage thing, but we don't really have huge projects, and the ones we do that are huge, we're taking money from other people, so we gotta do prevailing wage anyway, so it's not really a benefit. So they weighed all of those sorts of options, and it was pretty neutral.
Yeah, my recollection is the consideration of becoming a charter city was driven really by all the housing
Yeah.
stuff happening in Sacramento.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That we would have,
Well, it seems like,
home rule over our own general plan, which we
Yeah.
obviously don't, I guess, or at least the California Supreme Court doesn't think we do, or the Court of Appeal doesn't think we do.
well, it also seems like any potential benefits could be in the future, overruled by the state anyway.
Good. But the other thing that came up though, that was raised by one of the other members of the subcommittee was that if, let's say it's 2027 and there's some new law out there that's coming down about housing, and as Mona indicated, the tone of the legislature changed and they're not applying it to charter cities. If we don't have a charter at that point, it's too late to get one, because you've got to go through this process, an election process, it's gotta be on a general election. So there's that consideration for it too.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, George, but I think Portola Valley has just decided to take up the issue of becoming a charter city
Yeah,
and putting it on the ballot.
they have some other
Sorry.
challenges too.
Yeah, they got a lot going on,
Yeah.
but I think more and more cities are doing it so that they have more control of, as multifamily housing has come up more and more. So everybody knows it's not gonna help with multifamily housing, but they want more control.
We're looking into it.
So it's becoming more popular.
Yeah, and Portola Valley is specifically doing it, I believe, for the parcel tax reasons, generate revenue.
Yeah, I read about that too. Well, thank you all for having this meeting and
Yeah,
the
thank
other
you
meetings.
very
It's
much.
very, very
Thanks, Mike.
helpful.
All right.
Thanks, Laura.
Of
And this,
course,
before we go, is there anyone online who wanted to talk? Graham, Mike, or Nelson? If you could raise your hand. All right, seeing none, we'll end the meeting. Thanks for coming, everyone.